about to start. Please grab yourself a seat.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to an event full of information and solutions about a new Alberta, proudly brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project. My name is Glover Jackson, and I'm your MC for this evening. And I am here today because I want a better future for my family. And the way I see that is through an independent and free Alberta. So I am proud to stand before you here, not just as a supporter of this project, but as someone who is deeply passionate about the Alberta Prosperity Project and our mission to achieve a referendum for Alberta's independence. Now, before we begin the night, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. So the bathrooms are located on our left, that's where the restrooms are. The emergency exits are on our right through these two main doors, and there's also another emergency exit on our front left there. Yeah, my left, your right. We also have a membership and merchandise table located at the back of the room. We encourage you to visit and learn how you can support our movement further. Hence, every voice, every action, and every Albertan supporter is vital to our mission. Now, for this event tonight, we have two very experienced presenters sharing insight into our possible envisioned future of Alberta. So we kindly ask, for those of you interested in asking questions to our speakers, that there will be a question period at the end of the presentations. So we ask no questions during the presentation, and we further ask for no disruptions. We are here for respectful discussion and learning. If disruptions occur, we do reserve the right to ask those who are disrupting to leave, for all fairness to you and our guests. Now, about the Alberta Prosperity Project, I'll read the below. The Alberta Prosperity Project is a Alberta Prosperity Project is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit educational society. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and advocate to all Albertans about the benefits of freedom and prosperity through independence. The movement began in May 2021 at a humble oil field shop in Nisku, Alberta, where a group of Albertans, tired of the inefficiencies in governing and the constant overreach from the federal government in Ottawa, it was decided the time to act was needed. Out of those humble beginnings, the Alberta Prosperity Project was born. And here we are today, continuing with their efforts. We'd like to start this event with an opening blessing. So, Catherine.
So if we could bow our heads in prayer. We are grateful for the opportunity to come together and learn about a better future for Alberta. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here tonight as a participant or as a volunteer. We would ask that you guide our thoughts, words, and actions as we work peacefully toward our goal. An independent Alberta would be tremendous for us economically, politically, socially, and spiritually. Lift us up and give us the courage and strength on our journey. And all God's people said, Amen.
Well, I'd like to start off. I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Dennis Modry. He is a cardiothoracic surgeon and critical care specialist who started and directed Western Canada's first heart and lung transplantation program. During his 32 years in practice, he also served on the finance committee of successive provincial Conservative governments since Premier Getty. He is a founding member and chair of the Alberta Prosperity Project. He is a fiscal conservative, student of the Canadian Constitution, and is here to speak to us on behalf of the benefits of provincial sovereignty. Please welcome Dr. Dennis Modry.
Hello? It is on. I didn't believe him for a second. Well, wonderful to see everybody out tonight. Now, before I begin, I have two short tasks. The first is, this is Mitch and and sometimes Chris attends, but it's about our 70th town hall in the last, since April. And but we couldn't make these events happen if it wasn't for our many, many volunteers, of which there's about 20,000 plus now. So for all those volunteers that are helping to make this venue this evening successful, please give them a warm round of applause. All right, my second task is we're going to show a brief 4-minute video. Some of you might have seen it before. But this is a video that was created unbeknownst to us by Jim Ferguson from Scotland. He started an organization called Freedom Train International. And the song that is sung by James Kersey from Texas. But the whole idea of Freedom Train International is to galvanize the freedom forces around the world. And quite poignant, what he says in his brief introduction is that freedom-loving people around the world are pulling for Alberta's successful quest to achieve sovereignty. So without further ado, let's have the video.
Have been cast, the die is set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. From the rigs to the rails, the crops to the code, we lit their streets, we bore their load. They laughed at pride, they mocked the West, but freedom don't die, it just waits for the test. The cowboys ride, the farmers rise, 5 million strong under open skies. No leash, no lie, no foreign throne. This land is steel and it stands alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. Kill the mountain, can't drown the plain, can't burn the spirit that won't be chained. He stares down east with a calloused hand and says, this time we draw the line in the land. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line. stares down east with a calloused hand and says, this time we draw the line in the land. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands never on its knees, a nation born in the forge of the free.
Isn't it remarkable that somebody would do that from Scotland? Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. All right, so how many people are here at an Alberta Prosperity Project event for the very first time? Great. Yeah. He has to control me. He always is trying to control me. But then I'm trying to control him most of the time as well. So it goes both directions. All right, so now how many of you collectively then are already on the independence train and want Alberta to become a sovereign country? Okay. And how many are here because you need more information before you can make a decision that is right for you and your family? Okay, and there are a few people here. That's good, because it's important, to really to become educated, I guess you could say. And at the end of this presentation, for anybody that may be on the fence as to what they think they would like for the future, it really is a matter of informed consent. And by the time I've spoken and Mitch has spoken, we've answered some questions, then you should have enough information to percolate through your mind, and then you can come to your own conclusion as to what you think is best for yourself, your family, and for the region that we're living in. You notice I didn't say province. Anyhow. All right. How many people here are pleased with the outcome of the recent federal election? Raise your hand. I didn't see anybody raise their hand. You know what's interesting about that election is that when you look at the electoral map, what do you see? You see that Saskatchewan, Alberta, Central and Northern BC didn't vote the way the rest of the country voted, correct? And the reason for that is because we fundamentally have different values and ideals, a different work ethic, a different entrepreneurial spirit. We believe in individualism, but helping our neighbor, but we don't believe in collectivism or socialism, Marxism, if you will. And so this is one of the main reasons why people in the West, and those regions in particular, vote in a different fashion. Is anybody here more concerned about Mr. Carney than Mr. Trudeau? Okay, a number of you, and it's probably for good reason. He certainly is far better educated, and he's a very effective communicator. And he is a prominent member of the World Economic Forum, as many people recognize. And that in and of itself is a concern, because he is fomenting those ideals of the World Economic Forum. And they're particularly well outlined in his book entitled Values. Now, you can read his book. It's kind of a difficult read because there's a lot of economic terminology in it that economists like to use. But Peter Foster did a really great evaluation of his book, and he summated it in this way. He pointed out that when you interpret what Mr. Carney has said, Peter Foster is a writer for the National Post, and he did his first review in 2021, because that's when Carney's book came out, but then he did a follow-up review in January this year. You can look it up in the National Post. It's quite good. But nevertheless, this is what Mr. Carney thinks. He thinks that Western civilization is morally rotten, corrupted by capitalism, which has led to a climate emergency. And for that, there must be rigid controls on individual freedoms, on businesses aligned with oil and gas and agriculture, and on financial institutions that finance those businesses. And he goes on to say as well that he acknowledges that life will not necessarily be better for ordinary people. Now, when he says ordinary people, I don't know what you think about that. I consider myself an ordinary person. But what does he think of himself when he says that, as opposed to fellow citizens or something like that? In any case, life will not be necessarily better for ordinary people. In fact, temporarily worse. Fewer choices, less travel, less meat, more inconvenience, and more poverty. Does that sound like a future that you want? In his recent interview, he stated that there are going to have to be substantive sacrifices that the public is going to have to make. Do you think we've made sacrifices already? We certainly have, no question. But he goes on to say that assets will be stranded as a result of what he wants to implement. Assets will be stranded. You won't be able to sell your used internal combustion vehicle engine or vehicle, and that buildings will become unrentable, unusable. And how does he expect to achieve these objectives? Well, right out of the World Economic Forum playbook, he wants to institute an environmental social governance social credit score that you can be evaluated on, and depending on your compliance with those environmental social governance dictates will determine what privileges you have, i.e. whether you can travel, whether you can buy meat more than twice a week, as an example. So, and the other thing that is already happening is the whole idea of to actually effect these changes in the population. He will monitor you with a digital ID which tracks your whereabouts at all times. And in addition to that, of course, he wants to implement a central bank digital currency, a programmable central bank digital currency. So those who may have been adversely affected during the trucker convoy and you had your accounts frozen, you can imagine how much easier it'll be to force your compliance using that technology, which is coming. It's already been implemented in a number of areas, and it started off in China. And we're seeing it implemented in the UK right now, and it's starting already here. So, and on top of that, what he wants to do is ensure that a liberal government will be elected forever. And to do that, he's going to lower the voting age to 16, which is what Trudeau was already talking about, because when you are 16 and you vote one way the first time, you're likely to vote that way in the future. But to help cement that, the companion legislation is going to be a universal basic income. So when you're 17, you'll qualify for $2,000 a month. Can you imagine when you're 17 and you're a little bit lazy and you don't feel like working too much? Can you imagine what you're going to be thinking? Gee, $2,000 a month, and I don't have to do anything. Is that a disincentive for higher learning or learning a skill or a trade or being a productive member of society? Of course it is. But this is the way these folks are thinking. It's a very, not just socialist, but it's a very Marxist perspective on the way in which society should operate, and it really comes right out of the World Economic Forum, and if you really want to get into the details, it's right out of the Communist Manifesto. So anyhow, that's what we're facing if we do nothing. So you can ask the question, well, how did we really get into this situation? We are all at fault historically, because if you go back to September 1, 1905, that's when Alberta and Saskatchewan joined Canada. But we haven't been able to push back at all over 120 years. When Alberta and Saskatchewan joined, it was thanks to the efforts of a fellow by the name of Sir Clifford Sifton. He was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But it's what he said to an audience in Winnipeg in 1904. That's before Alberta and Saskatchewan joined. That was prescient. Because when you understand what he said in 1904, you'll understand why we're in the situation we are now. So here's what he said, quote, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire," Canadian patriots in 1904 were the people predominantly living in the east, okay, because Alberta and Saskatchewan hadn't joined. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies, that's Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the east, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity. Did you hear anything about the prosperity of the West in that? No, you didn't. It's not in his book. And by the way, that quote is Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, page 95, for the fact checkers out there, all right? Now, so therefore, we started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, and here it is 120 years later, and that's exactly what we're still doing. We're being pillaged and plundered for our wealth, but on top of that, we're having values thrust down our throat that don't necessarily align with the values that were foundational to Western civilization. So let's look at how this has manifested itself economically over the last 120 years. If you consider the equalization, which started in 1957, and we've been a contributor since 1963, plus the national energy policy, plus other federal confiscatory tax policy, plus regulatory costs, which most of you don't even think about because it's just buried in everything. We've given over $800 billion to Ottawa, not received a cent in return. Let's look at things in relation to the national energy policy for a moment. Some of you will remember what happened. In 1980, when that national energy policy was implemented, it devastated Alberta. People lost their homes, businesses went belly up, they moved out of the province, people committed suicide, it was a mess. Did Ottawa care? No, they didn't. Marc Lalonde, who was the finance minister at the time, when asked, why did you introduce the national energy policy? He said, and I want you to listen to this carefully because it ties right back to what Clifford Sifton said in 1904. What Marc Lalonde said was, we could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada. Do you think the federal government will ever permit Alberta to rise? It's very unlikely, and we're seeing us being squashed now. The Premier has pointed out that in the last 10 years, we've lost over $500 billion of planned investment in Alberta that dried up. That investment didn't occur because the investors couldn't see a business case to justify the investment. And why was that? Anybody know? Federal regulation and taxation. Business is not going to relocate or to invest in a high regulatory tax environment. But they will if the reverse circumstance exists, which is what would happen in a sovereign Alberta becoming one of the least regulated tax regions in the world. Now let's look at economic growth in Canada compared to all other industrialized countries in the last 10 years. Can anybody hazard a guess where Alberta's economic growth is compared to everybody else? We're dead last. 1.4% growth in 10 years. That tells you something, doesn't it? That tells you how we have been so mismanaged over the last 10 years. But it's even longer than that. And it's only going to get worse, ladies and gentlemen, if Mr. Carney introduces the kind of policies that he wants to introduce. And he's already warned us that there's going to be pain for all of us. Now, therefore, let's think about what can we do about this. When you understand the Constitution and you understand even in greater detail Alberta's history in Canada, you come to an inescapable conclusion that we can't do much, okay? We can't change the system. But fortunately, there is leverage that is available to us if we are willing to use it. And the only leverage that can change the system is when Alberta has a successful referendum on sovereignty. Nothing else will get the attention of the federal government and the other provinces. Let's take an example from recent history. You'll remember in 2021, we had a referendum to end equalization, right? 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization. What happened? Nothing. Did Ottawa even listen to us? I'm not even sure they opened a letter that came from Jason Kenney, because Jason Kenney knew that that was a virtue signaling referendum only to appease the people that were complaining that Alberta was doing nothing at the Fair Deal panel. Remember, he had those Fair Deal panels, and people spoke at them. So we had this referendum to end equalization. Does anybody understand why we can't open and change the Constitution? You would think that we could, but we can't. There are 4 hurdles to change the Constitution. And that's to make any change in the Constitution, okay? Not just ending equalization. But let's go through them briefly, because they're kind of fun to understand. So the first one is, if you want to open and change the Constitution, you have to have 7 provincial legislatures, 7 of 10 provinces legislatures, representing 50% of the population, voting to open the Constitution and change it to end equalization. That's hurdle number 1. What are the probabilities? Slow or low? Okay, let's say we got through that one. Then the second hurdle is you'd have to have a majority vote in the House of Commons. Now, a majority vote in the House of Commons, think about that. We don't have representation by population in Canada. Example, PEI, Prince Edward Island, elects 1 member of parliament for every 39,000 population. Alberta elects 1 member of parliament for every 130,000 population. Everybody else is in between. So we have the worst representation by population in the country. What are the probabilities of getting through hurdle number 2? All right? You see, it's diminishing returns, isn't it, as we go along. The third hurdle is you would have to have a majority vote in the Senate. Similarly, we don't have representation by population, nor do we have representation by region, which is the way a Senate should be set up. Okay, so that's the third hurdle. And then the fourth hurdle, as amazing as it may be, is Quebec has a de facto veto, all right? And they never even signed the 1982 Constitution, all right? And what it really means, what a de facto veto means, is that even though they didn't sign the Constitution, they have to be consulted for any change that occurs to the Constitution or that is contemplated. Their opinion has to be taken into account. And then, just by a show of hands, does anybody think we can open and change the Constitution? Oh, one other thing I should tell you. There have been 2 attempts to change it before. Mitch Lake and Charlottetown. They both failed. All right, just by a show of hands, does anybody think we can open and change the Constitution? If by chance there was a 1 in quadrillion chance we could get through those 4 hurdles, and it became a constitutional battle, who decides? It's the Supreme Court. All right? The Supreme Court. Think about how it's constituted. All of the justices are appointed from the Prime Minister's office. There are 9. 1 from the Maritimes, 3 from Quebec, 3 from Ontario, and 2 from all of Western Canada. You see the problem, ladies and gentlemen? The Federation is operating exactly the way it was intended, to control us. And the Eastern Laurentians, they will never give up power and control over us. We have only one choice, and that's to take that power and control to ourselves. And the only way that can happen is to have a successful referendum on sovereignty. Now let me touch on that term a bit. How many people were at the rally? Oh, geez, there was a lot of people at the rally. Well, I'm not even going to get into all the details on sovereignty, but let me just say this. Sovereignty is not a right or a left issue, okay? Sovereignty is pragmatic because it benefits everybody. It doesn't matter what your political stripe is, and it does not matter if you are a union worker or a non-union worker Old, young, everybody benefits in a sovereign Alberta. And the pursuit of sovereignty is noble. And some of you might remember what I said about this. But it's noble because you're pursuing self-determination. You're pursuing your goals and aspirations. You're pursuing freedom and prosperity. And in our new constitution, which we're going to be releasing sometime in the next few weeks, sovereignty is reflected when you enshrine in your constitution those Judeo-Christian values and principles that were foundational to civil society, the rule of law, and your God-given individual freedoms and rights. So that's an important concept to understand in terms of, where we're at. And when you see all of the things that are happening around us, you see how those values and principles that were foundational to us are being pulled aside. All right, let's look at, I do want to touch on something I did say at the rally, and I've said many times, is the provincial government and its perspective on sovereignty. They introduced, as their first piece of legislation, Bill 1 called the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act, right? They did introduce that. And why did they do that? They did it for a very simple reason. And that was that they wanted to be able to push back against federal overreach and usurpation of provincial constitutional authority. But it hasn't worked out very well. And the only way the provincial government has been able to respond to this federal intrusion and control of us is to launch lawsuits against the federal government. And that's what every provincial government before the current provincial government has done. And those lawsuits relate to oil and gas, development and transport, agriculture, censorship, and property rights, particularly firearms is the most recent one. And so knowing that we're not able to effectively deal with the federal government, and the only benefit of all of those lawsuits accrue only to, the lawyers, right? And the provincial government doesn't benefit too much, but they benefit a little bit because you and the public think that they're doing something by launching lawsuits, but they're achieving nothing because we can't win. We can't win our sovereignty. We can't win control of our affairs. Now, sovereignty at the individual level, though, means something very different. It means that we would be completely out from under all federal regulation and taxation. And what that means to everybody is, anybody who's making an income, instead of paying 43% of your income on average, because that's the average amount of tax we're paying now. Interestingly enough, it was only 6% in 1910, and in 1950 it was 18%, and 36% in 2010, and here it is now 43%. Given the debt, by the way, the massive debt, which is 1.3 trillion, and Carney wants to add another 100 billion to that, can you think about who might be paying for that debt through higher taxes? So which way do you think the taxes are going to go if we do nothing about this? Well, so it's clear that we have a tremendous opportunity to get out from under that. So rather than paying 43% taxes as an individual, you would only be paying something in the order of 8-10% tax. That makes a huge difference in terms of your individual sovereignty to purchase the goods and services that you need for yourself and your family, doesn't it? So if we think about then, well, where are we actually at now? How do we get out of this mess? We get out of this mess through having a referendum on sovereignty, because that is a component of the legal pathway for Alberta or any province to leave Canada. Now, how many people here, just by a show of hands, know anything about what that legal pathway is? Have you heard the term the Clarity Act? Okay, how many? Just by a show of hands, how many people have heard of that? Okay, so I got it clear. How many people have never heard of the Clarity Act? All right, okay, so let me just give you a brief explanation then. The Clarity Act arose because of what happened with the second Quebec secession referendum in 1995, which missed by a fraction of a percentage point. The federal government was nervous about that referendum, and then subsequent to the referendum, they posed a question: does a province have the right to unilaterally declare its independence from Canada? And they posed the question to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did a detailed analysis. And from that analysis was born the Clarity Act. And the Clarity Act has 3 criteria. One, you have to pose to the public a clear question on leaving Canada and becoming a sovereign country. Second, there has to be a clear outcome, which in a democracy should be 50% plus 1. And 3, the third criteria is you have to demonstrate that you have had conversations or consultations with other interested parties, such as Métis, such as First Nations, such as other political parties, etc. And so the linchpin in all of this, though, is that successful referendum on sovereignty. But to get to that referendum, you have to but you have to compel the provincial government to hold a referendum on sovereignty. So we've had, as some of you will know, we've posed a question through the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is, do you agree that Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? And that question went to Elections Alberta, and the Chief Electoral Officer wondered whether or not that question would contravene Section 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution. Section 1 deals with individual rights, and the rest of it deals with Aboriginal rights. And so that question is now caught up in the court, and we'll have a decision on what the court has to say by the end of this fiscal year, by the end of this calendar year. And as you know, Mr. Lukasik has also posed a question, and ostensibly he's received enough signatures, and we'll see what those signatures, if they do add up to the threshold required. But we can assume that there's a probability that he has the signatures for his question. His question is, do you agree that Alberta shall remain in Canada? All right, so he will have petition signatures which are yes and no. Whether it adds up to his threshold, I don't really know. But let's examine the outcome of a referendum on that question. Do you agree that Alberta shall remain in Canada? Now, I should clarify something. That's a question that can't change the Constitution. It's a policy question. In other words, conceivably, if the referendum passed, then the provincial government might change their bylaws in a way in which the bylaws say that the UCP party can't ever hold a referendum on sovereignty, okay? So that's the concept of his question. Our question does change the Constitution. That's very different, okay? And it's very clear in the Citizens Initiative Act, the difference between the two, because his question doesn't have to comply with Section 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution, because his question is, do you agree that Alberta shall remain in Canada? Let's look at a yes-no answer. If the answer to that question by the public is yes, what happens? Nothing. If the answer to that question is no, what happens? Nothing. Nothing, because it doesn't change anything. So it would be a $20 million referendum for nothing, okay? So the Premier knows this, the provincial government knows this. How they handle this is going to be interesting to see, and whether or not we are able to go ahead with our petition question. Now, the Premier herself could take the question that Mr. Lukasik has posed, and the government itself has the right to change the question any way they want. So they could change the question to make it compliant with the Clarity Act so that it's an actual constitutional question. And there's a lot of political reason that the UCP will benefit as a result of having a proper question, or suffer if they don't have a proper question. So that's an important point to understand in all of this. And here's something I want you to know as well. When the Supreme Court analyzed the question from the federal government, That was the Quebec secession reference, i.e., does a province have the right to unilaterally declare its independence? Section 154 and 155 is quite interesting. So Section 154 says this, and the Supreme Court analysis is superior to the Clarity Act. That's important to understand as well. So the Section 154 says this, if a people in Canada, in a region, find themselves in a colonial relationship with the superior power, that's the federal government, and they can demonstrate that they've been subjugated, dominated, exploited, or their self-determination inhibited, they have the right to hold a referendum on sovereignty and enter into negotiations which can lead to them becoming a sovereign country. All right? That's important to understand. Something else that's important to understand is Section 155. Section 155 says that although a province doesn't have the lawful right to declare its sovereignty, it may do so in an unlawful fashion subsequent to a successful referendum on sovereignty if other countries acknowledge that successful referendum. Isn't that interesting to know? So, however the premier, or whoever is the premier, would handle a successful referendum would be subject to whatever happens. We can only contemplate what a premier might do. A premier that was solidly in favor of sovereignty would declare that independence right after a successful referendum, and then negotiate the terms of secession from a position of strength. Exactly where the premier is, I don't really know, but it is important to understand this. She did lower the threshold for a referendum on sovereignty to change the Constitution from 600,000 to 177,000. She and Mickey Amory, the Minister of Justice, have come out publicly and said they want our question to go forward. So, if they want our question to go forward, there's a simple solution to make that happen. And that is, they're sitting now, the legislature is sitting now, they could easily remove the statute in the Citizens Initiative Act so that a question to change the Constitution becomes devoid of that requirement to be compliant with Section 1 to 35 of the Constitution. Because if you think about it, if you have a successful referendum on sovereignty, the Canadian Constitution no longer exists, right? It's irrelevant under those circumstances. So we're looking to see whether or not the provincial government and the premier has the courage to actually make that modification, which would end the court case. For one thing, we'd go ahead and collect our petition signatures, which would be easy to do, because we have well over 250,000 now, or somewhere around 250,000 registrants with us now. But interestingly enough, we have over 1 million supporters. That's something that's important to understand as well. So now I want to tell you just about a couple of other things that are kind of interesting. Number one is that we did meet with the U.S. administration on 2 occasions. And I'm actually quite pleased, as one of the founders of the Alberta Prosperity Project and the Prosperity Society, that we have received the international recognition that we have, with major media from around the world coming to our venues, and to have these 2 meetings with the U.S. administration at the highest echelons of power. First meeting was on April the 22nd, and it was an hour in length. We had a document prepared, benefits of Alberta sovereignty to the U.S. and to Alberta citizens. And a couple of key things came out of that meeting. Number one, that the U.S. Is solidly in support of Alberta sovereignty, becoming a sovereign country. Number two, if we have a successful referendum, they will acknowledge Alberta sovereignty, okay? And number three, that there's no appetite on Alberta, on the part of Alberta citizens, nor on the part of the U.S. administration for Alberta to join the United States. Okay, none at all. And for us, as Alberta citizens, why would we want to jump from the CRA to the IRS, for one thing? It wouldn't make sense, right? Particularly when we can be almost completely out from under all taxation, you know. So, and then for those people who would like Alberta to join the U.S., the reason it's not in the cards is because the U.S. can only accept a sovereign nation to join, okay? So Alberta is not a sovereign nation right now until it becomes a sovereign nation through a successful referendum. Second, there would have to be another referendum in Alberta where a majority of Albertans said, you know, we want to join the U.S., okay? Which really doesn't make any sense at all. And third, the U.S. Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, would have to vote in a 2/3 majority to accept Alberta as the 51st state. But the Democrats would demand that D.C. and Puerto Rico become separate states as well, and the Republicans will never agree to that. So there's no way the Republicans and the Democrats are going to agree on this. So it's a non-starter. So for anybody you're talking to about Alberta 51, tell them it's a non-starter. That's not going to happen. The second meeting that we had was on September the 29th for 2 hours, again with the highest levels of U.S. administrative power. And that was interesting because it was sort of just an update as to where we are at, confirmed the things that we talked about before. So I now want to move to one other subject, and that's the subject of meeting with Paul St. Pierre Plamondon. Anybody know who that is? He's the leader of the Parti Québécois. And so a few days before we went to Washington, it was a Thursday before, like we went to Washington on the 29th, so about a week or 10 days before that, we met with him. He had called us. He wanted to meet with us. Not the provincial government. He wanted to meet with the Alberta Prosperity Project. So Mitch and myself and Jeff Rath, our general counsel, for 4.5 hours met at the Palliser in Calgary. Very interesting meeting. When asked, why does Quebec want to leave Canada? 3 reasons. 1, preservation of their language. 2, preservation of their culture. And 3, they wanted to get out from under federal corruption, federal political corruption. I thought that was quite interesting. And if you saw today, Quebec is really up in arms about their culture being threatened by immigration. All right? So that's in the news today as well. One of the other things we talked about was pipelines. There's no way that, and oh, by the way, the Parti Québécois very likely will win the next election. They're leading in the polls. They've won their last 3 by-elections. Paul St. Pierre Plamondon has been the leader for the last 5 years. And so it's very likely that they're going to win. But in any case, we talked about pipelines, and there's no way we're going to get a pipeline to Quebec for a couple of reasons. One, ostensibly, they're very concerned about a pipeline leaking. So that's kind of a weak argument, but nevertheless, that's one of their arguments. 2, though, is that if they need more power, they just dam another river. They've got massive hydroelectric, one of the largest hydroelectric energy-producing regions in the world. They can just dam another river. And 3 is their refineries can't upgrade our heavy oil. So there's another reason right now that it's not in the cards. So another thing that came up, which was interesting, was Mr. Plamondon knew that we were going to the U.S., so he asked us whether or not we would ask the U.S. administration if the U.S. administration, too, would acknowledge Quebec's successful referendum on sovereignty. So we did, but we didn't get an answer. We just got a polite smile. And one of the things, though, I thought was interesting was the concept that we would very likely collaborate much better as separate countries without the interference of the federal government. We would probably be able to accept and recognize the differences. They're a more collectivist, socialist, sort of Marxist society. We're more individualistic, capitalistic out here. We can recognize the differences, respect the differences, but work together on areas of mutual interest, if you will. So we could cooperate that way. And, you know, it brings up the point, if you think about the way our federal government has operated for a long time now, it's sort of like a blender, and we all citizens in Canada are thrown into this blender, and we're homogenized. We're all supposed to think and act exactly the same. And that's part of the reason why the differences exist across Canada, why people are getting angry, because our differences, our uniqueness is not being respected by the federal government. And you know that phrase, vive la différence, let's celebrate our differences, rather than try and, you know, put a square peg in a round hole. And that's what the federal government's been doing to us, sort of a metaphor to think about that. And so this concept of us working together and recognizing our differences, I think is truly a valid point. Now, this is the most interesting thing of all, I think, in that meeting that we had with Mr. Plamondon. How many people here knew that when King Charles, when King Charles was here, during the opening of Parliament, that the entire Quebec legislature, and there are, you know, several political parties in the Quebec legislature, unanimously voted to end the relationship with the monarchy. How many people knew that? Yeah, isn't that interesting? So we asked Mr. Plamondon, I said, well, what are the implications of that? And he said he wasn't really sure. He said, but when I become premier, I'm going to jettison the lieutenant governor as well. And I said, well, you know, you do that. Let's think about this now. You're no longer under the monarchy. You no longer have a lieutenant governor. You never signed the Constitution. Are you already a sovereign country? You know, possibly, but he wants to have a referendum anyhow. I asked him, why do you want to have another referendum? You failed twice. Why do you want to take the risk? Why don't you just declare your independence unilaterally, i.e. Section 154 and 155 of the Supreme Court analysis? So as a lawyer and as the leader of the Parti Québécois, he hadn't even read that. So he didn't know about it, so I sent it to him afterwards because he asked me to send it to him. All right, so here we are in a unique circumstance. We have an opportunity to save ourselves. And I want to end off with a question. If we were already a sovereign country, would we want Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership? No. So if we wouldn't want that, then I think we all have a responsibility to do everything we can to get out from under the oppression that we are experiencing from the federal government. And we put the provincial government on notice as well, because I think, and I'll bet you all agree with me, that the provincial government should have an ethical, a moral, and an economic responsibility to Albertans to be Alberta first and Canada second. Thank you very much.
Mic check. There we go. We'd like to thank Dr. Modry for his informative presentation. Thank you, Dr. Modry. Now we have a quick announcement from one of our APP volunteers, Wade, so we'll come to the podium.
Hi, I'm Wade the Welcomer, and we're all volunteers at the APP, and we run on donations. Nobody gets paid. So if you could spare some cash, it'd be appreciated. You're going to see some yellow buckets running around here. Also, there's a bunch of merchandise at the back there. And Gary, the greeter, told me just before the event that he would buy all the merchandise that wasn't sold tonight. So help him out. He's always telling me how broke he is. And we don't give any tax receipts, so the CRA won't know who you are to seize your bank accounts. And so while that's happening, I'd like to draw your attention to them colorful papers there on the wall. I took the liberty of printing off some Reader's Digest versions of some bills that are currently in Parliament, going through Parliament in Ottawa right now. C2, 8, 9, 12, and 63, although Bill 63, the Online Harms Act, died with Trudeau when he left, but they'll bring it back. So, and then I would encourage you to go online and read those bills in detail, because the devil really does hide in the details. You know, they put all the unicorn and rainbows in the first few sentences, but the devil is in the details. And then after you read those bills, have a look what's happening in the UK and Ireland and other countries, and then ask yourself one question: what's going to happen to us if we stay? And I think you'll know the answer, because it's right there. And anyways, good to see Chris from the Whistle Stop and his people that he brought. That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. That's all I got to say. So thanks for coming.
Make it work. Now I'd like to invite our next presenter to the podium, Mr. Mitch Sylvestre, the owner and operator. There we go. Give my hand. All right. The owner and operator of Sylvestre Sporting Goods, a well-established store in Bonnyville since 1989. Mr. Sylvestre is actively involved in political advocacy. He chairs the Alberta First Pensions Plan Initiative and is the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mitch is an advocate for the people and speaks with honesty and integrity. Please welcome Mr. Mitch Sylvestre.
Hello, everybody. Well, thanks for coming. For the baseball fans in the building, it's 3-1 Blue Jays in the 7th. Runners on, first and second with 1 out. That's where we are with that. So if I thought I was being rude by looking at my phone when Dennis was talking, I'm kind of a baseball fan. So at any rate, I've got some kind of good news. It's going to start out pretty funny. I was death threatened through my MLA's office about 2 months ago. And the good news is they caught the guy. And he's actually going to have to come to Bonnyville to go to court, and he lives in Calgary. So that's doubly good news. And I'm concerned or wondering if they're going to give him as much or more as Tamara for mischief that she caused. I wonder if that's more serious than mischief. Just FYI. All right, so here's the way I'm looking at this whole situation here, is that if you were in business, and I am in business, and you belonged to a buying group, which is what essentially Canada is. Canada is a group of stores or a group of provinces that belong to a federation that should make you better off. The idea of that is, like in my buying groups, I'm part of 2 buying groups. I'm still in the sporting goods business. So I buy all my guns and ammo in the U.S., and I buy all my sporting goods, hockey, baseball, everything else in Canada. So the benefit for that, for me, is our buying group in the U.S. has 600 American stores. So it allows us to buy at the same level as the big guys, as the Walmarts and the Bass Pro Shops and the Cabela's and all that manner of stuff. We buy as many or more guns than them. So that being the case, we get to get the best price, and we get to make the most margin that we can make on that product. And that's what the buying group does for us. It makes us better, right? So just understand that. That's what Canada should be doing for Alberta. However, as we're going to see, that's not the case because it starts with this. Screw the West, we'll take the rest. Now, if my buying group thought that of my store, that they were actually going to screw us and take advantage of us to make them better off and us not as well off, would it be to my advantage to stay? And if you take the emotion out of it, you've got to totally understand that that's exactly the situation we're in. And I'll make that very much clearer. So my buying group would be, say, Canada doing to us the bills that harm specifically my store, or Alberta. So we've got Bill C-69, which is blocking pipelines, Bill C-48, the tanker ban for the West only, that would be for us, and that's designed specifically to landlock us. There's absolutely no way around that. That is exactly what it is. And then they block oil and gas investment, and carbon tax, costs us more money and takes away our profitability. Now I'm going to tell you that Mr. Trudeau and the Liberal government consciously trying to make us broker. They're consciously trying to make us poorer. And again, if you're in a business relationship with a partner that was consciously trying to hurt you, would you stay there? And who's at fault? The buying group or the store? It's very simple to me. Like the store has been elbows up from day one. Like Alberta's been elbows up from the very start. And this started 120 years ago. And it hasn't changed. Dennis alluded to this. We desire, and every Canadian patriot desires, that the great trade of the prairie shall go to enrich our own people in the East and to build up factories and the workshops of Eastern Canada and contribute in every way to its prosperity. Does anybody in the room doubt that that's still the case? Like really, what has Ottawa actually done for Alberta in the last, 40, 50 years? And absolutely since 2015. Like since 2015, it's been absolutely horrible. Does anybody in the room actually believe that there will ever be another Conservative government in Canada? No. You think that we have a chance? Good. Well, I'm happy because you're more optimistic than me. Because on that day, April 28th, I became officially an independent Alberta outside of Canada guy. Before that, I wasn't convinced. So I had hope up until that point as well. But here's the thing. Dennis alluded to this. I'm a kind of a visual guy, so I'm going to show you this. This is the way Confederation is working and the way it's designed to work. Western Canada is 11.7 million people and 24 senators. Atlantic Canada has a population of 2.4 million people and has 30 senators. Now understand this. I was just talking to Gary Davidson the other day, and his wife is an elected senator in waiting, and he informed me that Justin Trudeau appointed 97 of 107 or 8 senators. So I'm just going to ask you, can that work in our favor? And the other thing is that the federal government can change that instantly. They can go into Parliament, pass a law to make it fairer, and change it for Alberta. So why aren't they doing it? Because it's working the way they want it to work. And in the other house, it's the same thing. 55% more representation everywhere else than what we get. And understand that. They consciously pick on Alberta and don't allow Alberta to succeed so that they can do what they do. And we're going to get to that too. All right, here's go. Supreme Court justices by region. Dennis alluded to that. He made it very clear. I just want you to see it, how ridiculous it is and how it looks. 2 for Western Canada, 3 for Quebec, 3 for Ontario, and 1 for the Maritimes. Now, what do they all have in common? They're all French-speaking. And which way do French people tend to vote? They're all Liberals. I know, I'm French-Canadian. My grandparents didn't even speak English on either side. So they immigrated from Quebec, they broke the land, they did all that manner of stuff, but they voted Liberal their whole lives. But Mr. Polyev said this last week on X. He said, Nazi socialism, Soviet socialism, narco-socialism, and all other forms of socialism move at different speeds but always to the same destination. Now, this is the most important part of that. Impoverished hell for the many. That is what you should remember, because we will never be in the few. Impoverished hell for the many. Only freedom, free speech, and free enterprise and free choice empowers all to fulfill their potential and live a good and great life. So I'm going to ask you a question. Does anybody in the room doubt the fact that we're headed directly into communism? Now imagine that's where we are. We're basically accepting the fact that that's happening. We're not accepting it because you're here. And you went to the rally on Saturday, a lot of you, so you're not accepting that. You're doing what you need to do to make that change. But however, when the leader of the opposition, or the government of Canada, actually warns the people of Canada that we're headed directly towards socialism, and the whole rest of Canada is not paying attention, I don't get it. Like, I literally don't understand. I just don't get it. And what's the first thing that they want to do? If they're going to head into communism and socialism, they want to take your guns. And that's what they're trying to do. Now, up until 3 weeks ago, the amnesty had not been extended. So what that means to everybody in the room is that if you owned a restricted firearm, and I believe there would be 100 and some thousand Alberta gun owners that do that as of November 1st, they would have become criminals. Because the federal government has it, they would become gun criminals. Gun crimes are serious. Day one, you would have taken your passport. Danielle said that she was going to protect Alberta citizens by actually making the RCMP not enforce that law. However, I had a special meeting with her and I explained to her that that's not going to work. Because here's the problem with that strategy, is that you're a criminal, and the minute you become a criminal, you can't have a gun license or a PAL, so they're going to pull your PAL out, they're going to pull your passport out so you can't leave the country. And the other thing is, if you go to Saskatchewan and they pull you over, you're going to jail. So that's not a very large form of protection for gun owners, right? So we actually proposed a gun license for Alberta citizens that, you know what, they're all over. And then after a meeting with Mr. Carney, all of a sudden it went by the wayside. And I'm not saying that that happened at the meeting, but it was like 5 days apart. They were talking about doing it, and then they're talking about not doing it. So we're still up in the air about that. They've extended the amnesty for another 6 to 8 months to a year now. But when that next one expires, it's going to be a hard, absolutely date. They're not going to change anything after that. No more extensions. And Doug Ford, well, this is just a little aside, in Ontario, where they put the keys by the door so that people can come and break into your house, so they don't break right in. You can just grab your truck, and that'll be all good. He wants to shoot people that break into your home because him and his wife were in bed when somebody broke into his house. So I find that's kind of interesting. You don't ever want to be looking for a gun when you need a gun. All right. Let's talk about equalization payments. Let's talk about money, because that is what this is all about. That's what Mr. Polyev said, right? Mr. Polyev said, we will be very poor and very few people will be very rich. So if you understand that, it makes this all very simple. So this is what happens. Alberta gives $13.3 billion a year to Quebec every year, and Quebec is not a have-not province. Why does Quebec get to have $13.3 billion a year? Because they do not put Hydro-Quebec in the balance sheet for equalization. So that makes them a have-not province. And it gives them the opportunity to gather $13.6 billion from Alberta every year, and they're the largest recipient in Canada for equalization payments by far. So just add that number, keep that number in your head, that $13 billion when we're talking about the value of freedom. There's the next thing. Alberta's net contribution to Ottawa, more than $244 billion from 2007 to 2022. What's important about this slide is look at everybody else. Who is close to us in giving any money to Ottawa? See the disparity between Alberta and even the largest economy in Canada, which is Ontario. We pay 6 times more than them. And it's over a period of 15 years, so it's every year that we pay that much more than them. And understand, keep these numbers in your mind when you're trying to figure out whether an independent Alberta can sustain itself and what the value of the freedom actually is. And here's another place where we overpay: Alberta pension, Canada pension. Now I'm going to explain to you about pension because I've done 100 town halls on pension, and here's how this works. We pay $9 billion a year to the federal government. They pay $6 billion a year back to our citizens. That $3 billion goes into a fund for our seniors, and that is according to the CPP Act, which was Ontario that made it clear that they didn't want to pay more than their share if they overcontributed. And they wanted to be able to call back at any time what they had in their fund plus interest. So how much do you think Alberta has in their fund? $400 billion. Now, $400 billion is available for us to call back from the federal government according to the LifeWorks report. And we're not disputing that number. We've had actuaries look at it. Actuarial firms all over Canada have looked at it. As a matter of fact, the federal government had 3 actuarial firms look at those numbers, and they confirmed them. So odds are, if we took that to court, we would win. However, the federal government in their largesse has offered us $150 billion instead of $400 billion. But even let's take worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is that they give us $150 billion. The CPP is right now currently earning, according to them, 9.9%. So that would be 10%. Let's just round it off to 10%. So at 10%, we would be getting $15 billion a year in revenue from the fund, which would leave the principal sitting there. But we're also collecting $9 billion a year from our workers. So we would have $24 billion a year going to our pension fund, which we could disperse to our seniors or anybody else any way we chose, right? So that would actually, you could give our seniors a 4 times increase in pay on day one of an independent Alberta with that $150 billion there and still have your $150 billion principal. So we could make Alberta seniors somewhat better off. Because I'm going to share this with you that at current, our seniors collect $1,200 a month by average. You can't live on that in 2025, right? So our pension is anemic at best. All right. So when I became premier, Danielle Smith said, I thought I could fix everything in 6 or 7 months. But everything's broken. I was sitting right beside her, as you can see. And when she said everything's broken, she kind of looked up into the ceiling, kind of discouraged. So what does that mean at her level? At her level, that means everything's too corrupt to fix. That's what that means. And it's clear. Everything's too corrupt to fix. So let's look at the last 10 years of Liberal government. All right, so just so you understand what's actually happening. I believe that when Stephen Harper left power, Canada was in a pretty good spot. All right? And I mean, I wasn't worried about politics in those days. I didn't know the left from the right, didn't care about politics, was never going to get involved with politics. And I was pretty comfortable with the whole situation. But we have to understand something. Alberta is the richest piece of real estate in the world. Let's not be naive enough to believe that nobody else wants what we have, right? We're second or third in oil and natural gas. We have lumber. We have agriculture. We have minerals. We have everything we need. There's nowhere else in the world like this. And the rest of the world wants what we have. It's very clear. So we have a choice to make, and we have a path that allows us to make it, but we have to have everybody pulling on the same rope so that we can actually get there and protect what we actually have. I mean, we have to be naive to think that we're lucky enough to be born into a place like this and not have to defend it. And that's where we're at today. So I want you to tell me if there's anybody in the room that believes that the Liberals are stealing from us. Lift your hand up if you believe the Liberals are stealing from us. Okay, so that's pretty much everybody in the room. So when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. So let's take a step further here. out of $187 billion worth of Liberal infrastructure spending, finds 20,000 missing projects. And nobody went to jail. Right? Have we elected a king? Does anybody in the room believe that the politicians should be above the law? Does anybody in the room not understand that they are actually above the law? So I want you to put yourself in a position of having to negotiate with what is clearly organized crime. Right? I mean, what else do you call that? Right? And it's not just limited to that project. Let's go to ArriveCan. They sealed the documents for 75 years so that nobody could find out what was really going on. Mr. Trudeau prorogued Parliament after Green Slush Fund was $400 million short, right? $240 million for a vaccine factory that never produced a vaccine. Okay, so we just kind of rounded up $1 billion there, right? Pretty quickly. Do you remember when that federal MP had to resign over buying a $16 glass of orange juice? We've come a long ways, right? And we're accepting this. And that's the whole problem here. The whole problem is that there's a large part of our society that either doesn't know or is accepting this, and I think it's both. So let's move on from that. Okay, Mr. Trudeau spent $11 billion on overseas gender programs. How much of that money do you think actually went to gender programs? And I'm going to tell you something. Once you transfer the money out of the Canadian Treasury, and it's out of the country, it can be deposited in any bank in the world. So how nice is that? So just imagine if they went to one of these gender programs and they said, you know what, instead of giving you, I'll give you $2 billion, but I want $1.5 billion back. Right? And deposit it in a Swiss bank account for me. How much of that do you think goes on? Tons. Foreign aid is the biggest money scam there is. Absolutely. All right. So here's where the problem starts. The problem starts right here. Mr. Trudeau said, and I totally disagree with anybody that thinks Mr. Trudeau was a buffoon. I totally disagree, and I'm going to show you why I think that. But the whole thing with Mr. Trudeau is he put us in a whole different world. And this is where it started right here. There's no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state. That's a globalist statement. Post-national means no borders, means no nation. So the Prime Minister of Canada is actually telling the world that he's going to change Canada from Canada to something else. Without our permission, of course, right? Understand that. So no borders means a lot of things, and we're going to explore that in a minute. So what was the first thing he did? In 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for media to lie to the public. So in 2019, Bill C-39 was passed to allow them to lie to you legally. And that's the first step. The first step in any tyranny is controlling the message. Adolf Hitler did in the mid-30s, he gave everybody a radio. Everybody in Germany got a free radio, and everybody thought that was such a wonderful deal. But what did he do? He had that radio, they had that radio on every day, and he was controlling the message. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So you have to forgive those of us that have neighbors that are, especially if they're my age, that absolutely were used to listening to the truth every day. And in the last 6 years, all of a sudden that's changed, but they don't know about it. Who here knew in the room that C-39 existed? Yeah, there are quite a few of you, good. However, most people don't. Most people listen to the CBC and they still think it's gospel. So that's step one. Step two, the very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. So old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic. That's everybody in this room, basically. And we're an unpleasant relic, basically. Our forefathers came here and literally broke this land by hand and actually made this province, right? But But he found that they're an unpleasant relic and they have to be, quite frankly, replaced. I don't know if they're going to find anybody that works harder, right? Anybody that's more capable or anybody that's more intelligent, but they're going to replace it. So why would they think to do that? To destabilize us. And what did they do? They brought in 15 million immigrants into Canada since 2015. That's a lot of people. So if you base it on our population, which is about approximately 40 million, those 15 million immigrants to this day would represent about half our workforce. Now let's make this very clear. I'm not at all angry with the immigrants. They came here for the same reasons we came here. For a better life, for an opportunity to work hard and create a life, any life that they wanted. If they worked hard enough and smart enough, they could be very wealthy, very, very self-sustaining people. But they got here, and that's not what they were given. That's not what they're offered. I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day who said he came from India, and he had to pay like $30,000 or $40,000 to the people that brought him here, and in order to do that, he had to sell everything he had there. And then he got here and he got charged another $10,000 for a work permit. And then he lost his job. And he can't go back home because he's got nothing to go back to, and he's stuck here and he's not a citizen. So it's not the best. And we pay 42% in taxes. That's step 3. We are the most taxed nation in the world. Nobody pays 33 taxes except us. Why would a government do that to its people? To make them poorer. There's no other reason for it. They feel that you guys have money in the bank that they want. And how else are they going to get it? By taxing the hell out of you. So let's go down the list. Carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, GST, excise tax, fuel, alcohol, tobacco, cannabis excise duties, customs duties, air traveler security charge, luxury tax, provincial territorial taxes, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media, regulation, CPP, business tax, and estate tax. So I was in Lacrete the other day, about a week ago, and there was a guy sitting at our table having dinner with us before the event, and he said, my dad just passed away. He had 5.5 quarters of land in Lacrete. The land is valued at $1 million a quarter. So that land is worth $5.5 million. The estate tax on that land is 50%, capital gains. So the dad paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 a quarter for it. So let's just round it off that they, owed $5 million capital gains. They would have had to come up with $2.5 million to keep that land. So guess who it went to? Right? You couldn't even give it to your kids. So they had to sell everything, get what they could get out of it, and split the difference amongst the kids that were left. And that's with all of us. Now understand this. Once you die, if you own a house and you own a car, you become a rich person because all of your assets get put into one pool. And then once you get into that category, they tax the hell out of you, and then your kids won't get anything back because they don't want your kids to have the money either. And that's clear about what they're doing. That kind of tax is ridiculous. All right, and here's the other thing. What else did Trudeau do? He brought in a carbon tax. So what is a carbon tax? The big lie is what I call carbon tax. Now, the carbon tax has cost Canadians billions of dollars over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China produces 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. So 5 years of carbon tax here, and China produces that every day and a half, and guess where they get the coal? Alberta. Guess which port ships the most coal in all of North America? Vancouver. Absolutely. So how serious is carbon emissions really? Right? If they're actually understanding this, and they know that this is happening, and they're not trying to stop it at all, how serious is it? Do they really believe it's a thing? but they're using it to tax you. Now, the other thing is, China has 1,161 coal power stations, and they actually dismantled the one we had in Alberta. Does anybody pay attention to transmission and distribution charges on their power bills? Do you know what that is? That's because they dismantled that coal-burning electrical producing plant here in Alberta, and we're paying for it now, $4 billion. They knew that. They knew that. It was the cleanest coal-burning electrical generating plant in the world. And they absolutely knew it. Again, consciously trying to break us. And none of those countries on that list pay carbon tax except us. So we pay $7.9 billion in carbon tax from 22 on. So again, why are we paying carbon tax? What does that do to us? That cripples our industry. That cripples us. 17 cents a liter at the gas pump is what we're paying just in carbon tax. And you look at it in your heating bills, in everything that you do, every trucker, everything that they do increases the price because of carbon tax. Everything that you buy has a carbon tax component in it, and that will be gone in a free and independent Alberta. Now understand what we can do here. We can run our Alberta economy. My MLA is a chartered accountant, and he's kind of tried to simplify this for me. He said, we pay 43% in tax, but if we paid a 12% consumption tax on everything we bought, that would be all we would have to pay. We wouldn't have to pay any income tax, we wouldn't have to pay anything else. If we chose to buy something, we would pay a 12% consumption tax, and it would absolutely run Alberta. COVID. Mr. Trudeau brought COVID in. Also be aware that in 2019, they could lie to you. In 2020, COVID came in. Coincidence? I don't believe so. And they admit it was about political control and power because in the Pfizer documents, which we just saw, they came out, they read those documents before 2020, and they knew that the vaccine did not stop transmission or infection. And they tried to seal those documents for 75 years. And I totally understand as a retailer that when COVID happened, that's when people really started to shop online. Okay? That absolutely conditioned everybody to be able to use the internet to buy online. So as far as we were concerned as business people, we had to actually change a lot of the things that we do. We actually stopped selling shoes and clothes in our store because we couldn't sell them anymore because everybody was just buying them online. So we are able to adjust and do other things, but that's not the point. The point of it is that we lost a revenue stream to big business. Now, the other thing that happened during COVID is our government printed $400 and some billion. They created inflation. So understand what inflation does. Inflation actually, if you double the money supply, which they did, it actually halves the value of your money. And they did that within a 3-year period. So a box of 30-06 Remington ammo in my store, for example, went from $29.99 to $60 in 3 years, when it had been $29.99 for 20 years. 22 ammo was $1.99 a box for 20 years. But after this, it's $5.99 a box. So all of that influences you and impacts you directly. So your kids absolutely, basically have no chance, because this is going to continue unless we get out of this relationship. And that's how serious this is. This is as serious as a heart attack. There's no doubt about it. So then they cap production. So what does capping production do? It does exactly this. You're going to lose 40,000 jobs in Alberta, reduce GDP by $20 billion. So we're being attacked. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And people got to understand that this is happening at every single level. Everything they're doing is absolutely attacking our citizens. And our people have to understand this and have to get over the idea that we're leaving Canada, because I am going to tell you, Canada has left us. And it's not just it's not Canada. It is Canada because the rest of the country isn't standing up. But the whole thing is that we have to understand that we have to get over this silliness about the fact, and we have to save ourselves. If Alberta falls to this, the rest of the country will fall. Nobody has the strength that we have in many, many different ways. Now, the other part about this, and I'll just go by that slide was just a reminder, we're selling our natural gas to the US for $4 a unit, and they're turning around and selling it to Poland for $14 a unit. How's that work? Now I want you to pay very close attention to this slide, because this slide, Norway came to Alberta, and I remember when they did, they came to Alberta to study our oil patch and to see how to manage their money. So they went home. Today, Norway has a $1.95 trillion US dollar oil fund. And we're $100 billion in the hole. Now understand this, Norway produces 2 million barrels of oil a day. Alberta produces 4.7 million barrels of oil a day, and Canada produces 5.7 million barrels of oil a day. So we produce 2.5 times more oil. They have a $2.6 trillion Canadian oil fund that's gathering interest for them, and we're $100 billion in a hole. So where's the money? I can tell you where some of it is. So we produce $90 billion, for example. I was talking to a guy from Hardisty the other day. $90 billion a year of oil goes through Hardisty. The royalties for that is $40 billion. $20 billion comes to Alberta, $20 billion goes to Ottawa. So if you go 30 years times $20 billion, that's like $600 billion with opportunity costs. That would give us over $1 trillion right there. That money would stay here in a free and independent Alberta, that $20 billion. So what have we identified? $13.5 billion in transfer payments, $20 billion in oil royalties, $3.5 billion in pension. EI is $1.5 billion. So we're getting up to a pretty big number. It costs us about $70 billion to run Alberta, and we get that in taxes already. So then we would be able to add all this onto the top, and we would have a fiscal surplus, of which we could do a lot of things with. Right now, what's Ottawa doing for us? They're attacking us, right? So what has Ottawa done for us? This is the other thing they're doing. They're trying to landlock us. Everybody said, oh, Alberta's landlocked. Well, Alberta's landlocked because the federal government is consciously doing it. They say we have a tanker ban on the West Coast, except the Americans get to ship oil from Alaska right down the same coast to Seattle, and they do it every day. Does that make sense to anybody in the room? And Alberta said, BC said that they would double the thickness of the hull, or put a double hull on these big boats so that it would lessen the chance of an oil spill. And it still doesn't matter. Bill C-69, we won the case in court. What did the federal government do? They ignored it. We can't ignore them, but they ignored it. All right. Canada's the only country on the planet stupid enough to tax, cap, and ban the very industries that make us rich. And that's not all. They're not happy with attacking the oil patch. They want to attack the farm. C-293 says what? It says in the case of another emergency, they're going to be able to come to your farm and seize your land and your herd. And do you believe that they would do that? Good, because that's what's happening in BC at the ostrich farm. That's exactly what's happening in BC. So they've gone in there against the law, shut everything down based on a fake emergency, wouldn't let anybody test the birds, shut the farm down, kill the birds, and several neighboring farms around them. Same thing. What do you think of that? And we're watching it. And they hit us with a retaliatory tariff on canola. Why did they do that? They did that because what happened was they were going to ship this $10,000 electrical car to Canada, and we couldn't compete. So they're going to protect the auto industry in the East by putting a massive tariff on this car. This car was going to end up costing $100,000 instead of like $10,000 to buy. So what did they do? They tariffed our canola. Now understand this, our canola is bigger than the entire auto industry, steel industry, and aluminum industry in Eastern Canada combined. So who are they attacking? Us, Alberta farmers, right? And look what's happened. Industrial implosion. That's the amount of equipment that was bought for industry in Canada between 2015 and 2025. Look where we are compared to the US. And foreign investors flying out of here. Why? Because they understand what's going on. They totally get it. If I'm in business, and I am, I wouldn't invest in anything that I wasn't going to make any money. Like, we can do that all on our own. And here's Dennis was alluding to this. Understand this. There's no way you can do this unless you try to do this in this country with what we have. You remember when Greece, Germany, and Japan came to Canada and said, hat in hand, please sell us natural gas? And what did Trudeau say? It's not in our business plan. What does that mean? It means it doesn't fit into this plan. The plan that we're supposed to keep our people broke. That's exactly what it means. That's exactly what he said. Do you know how big a contract that was over the next... Trump took some of it and they put $750 billion value on it. And we wouldn't be able to produce that. That would generate money and jobs for our people for 50 years. Taiwan, same thing. They just came and they're begging for energy. But it's not in our business plan, apparently, to sell it to them. So that's the equivalent of somebody coming into my store and saying, Mitch, you know, I would like to give you $3-4 million a year in business for the next 40 years. And I would say, no, it's not my business plan. Now just imagine how, it's equally that silly. It really is. All right, so then Mr. Carney came in and the table was set, right? Justin did all those, and he censored us too, by the way. So Mr. Carney comes in, and Mr. Carney is an investment banker whose job was to go around the world and bankrupt the countries that he was working in so that he could parse out the industry and the resources to big bankers. So do you think that's possibly happening here? They're leaving our industry in the ground. They're leaving our oil in the ground. They're leaving our resources in the ground. They know where they are. I mean, this has been going on forever. Everybody knows about the Tides Foundation. And Gerald Butch is working for the Tides Foundation. Rockefeller spent, what, $1.5 billion to keep our industry in the ground? And that's what's going on. They don't want to develop our industry because our industry is safe right where it is, and it's a really good spot. They can access it anytime they want. However, what does that mean for us? That means that we haven't got the opportunity to grow our economy, and as a consequence to that, our kids are having a hell of a time. And as a consequence to all these major taxes, you need two families, two people in the house to work. And what happens to basically your ability to raise a family? So they're attacking us on every single level. And they understand all of this. And that's why they're bringing in all these immigrants to fill in the gaps, because we can't afford literally to have babies. You can have 1, 2, but you have to go to southern Alberta, though. They have 6, 7. Like, they're doing a real job over there. I'm not going to lie to you. But the whole thing is that absolutely that's totally on purpose. Mr. Carney, now this is what happens when you control the media. Everybody in Canada should have known this, that Mr. Carney is a flaming communist, right? And he says it. He doesn't even hide it. They're not afraid to say it. Mr. Carney said, Western society is morally rotten and has been corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency. And this, he claims, is going to require rigid controls on personal freedoms, and assets will be stranded, used gasoline-powered cars would be unsaleable, inefficient properties will be unrentable, he promises. That's your property. And what he wants is a technocratic dictatorship justified by climate alarmism. So what's a technocratic dictatorship? That means when the people in business make the rules Unelected officials make the rules for the people. They decide. Big business makes the rules. That's what a technocratic dictatorship is. It's an absolute direct form of communism. Why does George Soros, who's a big businessman, want to do the things he does and have the left do what they do? So they can have a monopoly. So that he can run his businesses and monopolize all of the income. That's the logic behind all of this stuff that's going on. Big business wants to control everything, have monopolies, and stop competition. That's absolutely their goal in life. Now, Daniel Smith said all of this, repeal C-69, lift anchor bans, scrap oil and gas, end clean energy, reverse plastics ban, I think she took that out, cancel the net zero car mandate, cancel all the net zero mandates, and what does Mr. Carney do? He keeps the production cap on Canadian oil and gas and says, how can you do any of those other 12 if he doesn't rescind this? I'm going to ask you a question. If we get a pipeline, is that enough to stay here? Everybody's unanimous everywhere we go. How can you, even if you get another pipeline and you raise more money, where's it going to go? Gone to them, right? And we're going to be just as broke as we are now. People are understanding that now. Like, I'm going to tell you something honestly about this whole conversation. I have been to 70 or 71 town halls. We've been to every place in Alberta. We talk to people every day about this. 40 to 50% new people in every room, every night. Every young person I talk to under 35 agrees with this. Everywhere we go, people agree with this. We have had one protester and 6 peaceful protesters outside the door in Hinton out of 70 town halls. People are not fighting this. People are going to accept this. I really honestly believe that we're winning. I really do. But Mr. Carney, in his mission to break Canada, $85.9 billion in investments have left Canada in the first 7 months. And in the first 7 months, he said, and I want you to look it up on YouTube, basically he's saying, look in my eyes, I'm telling you the truth, right? He said, I have no conflicts of interest in my business portfolio, right? He basically told, as a CBC reporter he's talking to, and she's questioning him, and he says, no, look at, and on Friday, they found out he has 103 of them. So here we go again. How is he still Prime Minister? How can a criminal be running our country and absolutely standing there immune to our justice system? And here we go. Since he's been Prime Minister, 42 contracts, he's secured 42 contracts, all have been with Brookfield Management. Every one. And C2, C9, C8, all of those bills are going to make us a police state by Christmas if they pass. That's according to John Carpe. So we have an emergency. And 17 countries have rolled out digital ID in the last 3 months. Canada's in there, right in the middle. Once they have you on digital ID and digital banking, it's over. The game is done. All right, let's go here. No time in history where people were censored. The people that were censoring them were the good guys. It's never happened. All right, so this is what we got to do. Everybody says, oh, they're so massive, they're so big, we can't fight them. I totally disagree. I totally disagree. And the reason I'm telling you that is because if they could, it would be done already. Does that not make sense? Does anybody believe that if they could actually do this in one fell swoop, it would be already done? Okay. So everybody says, oh, Mitch, you can't do this. You're fighting a monster. But I'm going to tell you what, we're a bigger monster. There's millions of us. I'm going to share a story with you. In ancient Greece, in Athens, a long time ago, they had a meeting in the Senate. And one of the senators had a good idea. He said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to put a red cape on every slave. And one of the other senators said, whoa, better be careful with that, because they're going to see how many of them there are and how few of us there are. And this is what I'm telling you. There's a handful of these people. There's millions and millions and millions of us. So I was actually at a Prairie Rising conference in Regina about 2 weeks ago. And there was a soldier who got up and, told a really good story. I actually tried to get him to the rally last week. And basically what he said was, I've been in every shithole in the world in my military career for the last 20 or 30 years, however long that was. And he says, but this sticks out to me. He was in Afghanistan, and he actually had a picture of himself on top of a roof. And he was saying, bullets are whizzing by my head, but I didn't want anybody to know that I was afraid. So they got this picture of him, and then he comes down from there. What they had done was, this was a school for girls. And the Taliban had gone in, or whoever the group was, it doesn't matter what you call them, and actually killed all the girls for daring to be in school. So they actually cut these girls up and put them down someplace basically in a sewer system. And our guys went in there and killed them. Got all these soldiers and killed them. And he said, there's a currency to be paid for freedom. Freedom is not free. What he said is we paid in blood. And what I'm asking every one of you to do is pay in time. Because all it's going to take is when I call all of you, I want you to show up and stand there. All you have to do is stand there. You don't have to get shot at. You don't have to get anything. You just have to be counted. Because that is what is going to scare them. They don't want you on the street. Because that's going to draw attention to what they're doing. They don't want you standing there and protesting against them. We had 15,000 to 17,000 people there on Saturday. Believe me, they saw you. Trust me, they saw you. The reason I called that rally is because I had a meeting with government, and I said, you guys are ignoring us. I'm going to show you that we exist. So I'm calling a rally, and it's going to be on the 25th of October. I'm going to show you that we're there. So now the next most important thing is that was a huge win. Right? I'm very proud of everybody, and I'm thanking everybody that showed up. That was a huge win. And that can be day one for those of you that attended of my 10 days that I need from you. I need 10 days a year for you to come when I call, if I call, and you just have to go out there and stand there, but you cannot make any excuses. Because the timing, I'll give you time, but the timing, you have to be there. Could you imagine if Dennis alluded to the fact we had 250,000 people on our list, if everybody had showed up? I got to tell you what, we call our 250,000, and then they bring a friend, and we get 500,000, and then we do it again, and they bring a friend, and this is over. This whole mess is done. They're not going to deal with it. They won't be able to deal with it. They won't want to deal with it. They're just going to let it be, or they're going to take the next step, which they're going to take anyway. Right? So our chance here is to all show up. So the next most important thing that we're doing is the AGM. And the AGM is at the last weekend of November. It's a month away. The reason I'm bringing that up for you tonight is that the early bird ends Friday night at midnight. The difference in the cost of a ticket is going to go from $169 to over $400 on Saturday. So I would like to ask everybody in the room, it's here in Edmonton. You don't have to drive, you just have to show up. We will make it very clear to everybody that attends that wants to know who our people are that are running for important positions. Danielle is actually going to run a slate against us. Yeah, that's true. And the reason for that is, and that's politics. That's politics. So what we have to do is we have to understand that if we want people that think like us in positions of power, we have to put them there, because that's what they do. Jason Kenney, on his first AGM, busted lots of people into school buses to do that very thing so that they can control the board. Now understand the difference between the provincial board and the government. The provincial board, UCP board, represents the members, represents us. The government represents the people of Alberta. There's a big difference there. Our UCP party happens to be in government, but sometimes they lose their way, and it's our job as citizens to make sure that they stay on track and represent what we want. And the only way that that can happen is if we show up. They have to know we're there. So because we have been apathetic and basically not participating in our democracy, that is why we're where we are now. It's basically that simple. And I'm not going to pretend that I was any better than anybody else. I didn't get involved in politics till COVID. So I was a senior citizen before I got involved in politics, basically. So I'm just saying, and now I have the time. I raised 5 kids, and I was coaching hockey. I was doing everything that everybody else is doing and running my business. But now everything has to stop on particular days a year if we want to win this, because that's the currency it's going to take for us to win this fight. It's that simple. All right. Now just understand this. $47 billion net loss to Ottawa every single year. That's $40,000 per Alberta household. That's every year. And the only person coming to save you, unfortunately, is the version of yourself that's tired of your current situation. Politicians are not going to save us. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. Okay, Q&A. Any of you have any questions? Kind of line up over here. Come on over. Max, are you going to hold the mic? Oh, you're going to hold the mic. Perfect. Don't let it go.
Is it on?
Don't let it go. Okay.
Mine is real quick and simple. Okay, so if we go to the AGM, how is that going to help us get more people to sign up for the referendum for independence?
Okay, so signing people up for the referendum for independence, so we have 3 plans. We have a plan A, plan B, plan C. Okay, so we have to make sure that here's where we are right now with the referendum. The Premier can use Mr. Lukaszyk's question or his numbers to actually call a referendum for independence based on a constitutional question if she chooses. Our goal is to make sure that that happens, right? Because the nothing burger question, and that's according to Justice Feasby, is not going to get us anywhere. Now, the Premier has been saying in public that that question is equal to ours. Well, we can't allow that to happen because it's not equal to ours, and she fully well knows it's not equal to ours. I equate it to a bite. Mr. Lukaszyk's question is a mosquito bite. Our question is like being bit by a great white shark. Our question is the real deal. So in order for us to influence government and caucus, we have to go to the AGM so that they see that we're going to vote against them and we're going to show up if they don't do what we would actually ask them to do. And the whole Citizens Initiative Act was designed so that citizens could bring a question to government that in most cases they don't have the courage to deal with on their own, and they can actually put it back on the laps of the citizens. But what they did with this Citizens Initiative Act is they put a loophole in it on purpose. Whoever put that loophole in there, it's not an accident. Since when does Elections Alberta actually determine what the election's about? Right? That's what they're doing. Elections Alberta is in control of this question. How the hell is that possible? Elections Alberta is there to run elections. That's their job. Free and fair elections. That's exactly what their purview is. However, all of a sudden, they're right in the middle of this thing with their finger on the scale and delaying the whole damn process. So if we go to the AGM, The goal is to put our people in places where they can influence government. So if we have an overwhelming number of people at the AGM, they will see it. We'll get you to wear a black hat or something black or that button that you got on or whatever you got to do. And then, so they'll know we're there and they'll understand that we actually want to participate in our democracy and vote for our own people. And I think that's reasonable and fair.
Let me make a comment to that just to clarify a point here. There are 18 members of the UCP Board of Directors. Half of them are up for re-election every year. And what Mitch is talking about is being there to vote for the people that are Alberta first, okay? And there are candidates, and you will know, and we will be able to let you know who the ones are that we think are very supportive. Right now, about, 16 of 18 are in favor of Alberta sovereignty. We did that over the last 3 years. Take Back Alberta and the Alberta Prosperity Project did that. But we can only do it when you people are in the audience and you vote for the individuals that you want to be on that party board. Okay, this is really important because they do influence what the MLAs are able to do.
I forgot something. Okay, so thank you for that, but I'm going to just share something with you. If you cannot afford to attend, we will give you a place to call and we will get people to help you pay your way there. Okay, that's how important this is. But you got to promise to vote for us. FYI, strike that. Okay, go ahead.
Hi there. My question is regards to, in the document, the value of freedom. So you alluded a little bit to how an independent Alberta would help lower taxes and that sort of thing. But can you just touch on some other household things, like example, utility bills or car insurance? I have a 19-year-old and it just cost us $4,400 for him to have his own car insurance. So kind of everyday things like that, how that might be affected and reduced for households in Alberta.
Right, well, first of all, you need to look at it from the point of view to, let's use some numbers to make it really simple. If you're making $100,000 and you're paying $43,000 in tax, then you have $57,000 of disposable income, right? Now, in a sovereign Alberta, you're going to have roughly $90,000 of disposable income, not $57,000. So when you're out from under federal regulation and taxation, whatever taxes are on the products or services and whatever regulatory costs are on those products and services will be gone if they are federally imposed. So what you're referring to will cost less, but you'll have more to spend. So you benefit in two ways. That's a simple way to answer that question. Do you want to be more specific? Put an example?
That might just be more competition, I guess. If more businesses come into the province after, that'll help competition with cell phones, insurance,
Well, there's no
etc.
there's no question about it. And you bring up a really good point, and that is, just from a fear-mongering point of view, there will be people who will say, business will leave. Business won't invest. What's happened in the last 10 years? We have clear evidence of that. So when you have the least regulated and least taxed region one of the least, if not the least, regulated and taxed region in the world, that will be a magnet for investment. And that will generate competition. And competition benefits everybody because when you think about, how does business survive? I've always thought that business is the most giving of anything in society, any activity in society. And the reason is because it has to provide a service or a product at a competitive advantage. Otherwise, it can't survive. So it has to lower its costs, improve its quality to be competitive with other businesses. And this is exactly what happens. This is the essence of capitalism. This is why it's lifted more people out of poverty than anything else. So I think there's no question that you'll be happy in a sovereign Alberta, much more so than now.
Okay, so I just want you to understand something else. In this discussion we've had with the Americans, and Jeff is a big proponent of this, if we have a free trade agreement with the US, that will allow big American business to come here and lower prices on a lot of things. Your cell phone stuff, we're pay the highest in the world here. So just saying, if the Americans could come in here and do that, there would be a big advantage to both sides, understand that. Our bank interests might go down based on the fact that, we'll probably be banking in US dollars, so we could take advantage of the banking system in the US as well. I'm not saying that we should abandon our banking system. They should have to be able to compete, and they should be able to compete. But the other thing that's going to happen is with this increase in citizens having money, is that we're going to see a business boom, right? And it's not accounted for in our value of freedom, because people will have more disposable income and will spend it. And that's going to be a great thing for business. That would be a great thing for my business, a great thing for everybody's business.
Well, just a quick comment. The governments on various levels have decided that we need small nuclear reactors. Okay. And these are provided by Cameco from Vancouver and a company it bought called Westinghouse, which has 80 years experience doing this.
Yes.
Well, they were just given the green light by the Trump administration to build 80 of these in the United States, and their stock went up commensurately. But what nobody seems to know, and the CBC doesn't want to report, but I talked to 4 Alberta cabinet ministers last night, and they do know about this, is that they're required to have a partner. And the partner is? Brookfield. And it's still owned by Mark Carney, and he moved the head office to the Bahamas so they don't have to pay any taxes in Canada. And it's the biggest of all the conflicts of interest. So when you talk about crony capitalism, that's a big problem. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Agree with you. Thank you. So we're building nuclear reactors over trillions of barrels of oil and gas, right? How much sense does that make? Anyway, go ahead.
I'm just wondering how a sovereign Alberta would be able to manage municipal governments and their spending and their fairy tales.
That's a really good question. So how would a sovereign Alberta handle municipal governments? Stay tuned. It's going to be very clear in our proposed constitution for Alberta. But let's face it, if we have a government in a sovereign Alberta that's a constitutional republic with far better checks and balances, far greater accountability, 2 terms, and much smaller government, that's going to be reflected municipally as well. Okay, so that's the answer to your question. That's the last thing we need is too much. We have too much government now, right? We're over-governed, over-regulated, and overtaxed. How do you get out from under that? You blow the whole system up, introduce a new constitution that permits us to be less governed, less regulated, and less taxed. It's that simple.
First of all, I'd like to clarify, I am agreeing almost with everything you said.
Almost.
Yes.
Almost.
The one thing that concerns me is I do think that we are facing a climate emergency, we could say.
I don't think, or I do?
I do think.
You think
I do
that?
think it. Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I know that a lot of people also believe global warming is real. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now,
That's okay.
I understand that there are people who are on both sides of that issue, and I've been wrong before. But I think that is a real thing. And I actually think that we could still be better off, but I wonder, because that is a large body of potential supporters of what you do, and I'm one of them,
Good.
okay?
Thank you.
I wonder if we might somehow take that into consideration and come up with arguments that address climate change as well and make that a big part of what we're doing.
So I want to ask you a question, sir. Just say that the climate is warming up. Are we sure it's caused by carbon? That's the issue.
Okay,
Right?
but
So
that's not
I'm
enough.
just listening to
That's not
something the
enough.
other
Are we
day.
sure it's not
So
carbon?
let me say one more thing. Apparently, there's a lot of heat from the tectonic plates underneath the ocean. And the ocean is warming up. And that's not caused by carbon. So that's the latest theory I've heard, but understand this about climate. Climate by its very nature is unpredictable. Like so what I'm saying to you, and I totally can sympathize with your thoughts, and I totally see that it makes total sense to everybody watching all the cars out there, but the catalytic converters that they put in cars actually emit CO2. So, and the whole thing of it is it's plant food, and here's the other thing, and I know Dennis doesn't like me to share this because he doesn't, I don't know where he stands on it, but he thinks it's out there. We have 600 billion trees in the boreal forest in northeastern Alberta, in the north of Alberta. So even if we were producing carbon here, which I don't think we are, I think we're carbon neutral and carbon negative, according to their stats, 30 billion trees would suck up all the carbon Canada produces, and we have 600 billion trees in the boreal forest. So that being the case, we have 570 billion unemployed trees. So I'm just saying that this is such a complex thing, and that they've gone out there. What I'm trying to explain to you in all that nonsense is that they shouldn't be able to shut down industry in the country that's the cleanest producing energy country in the world based on carbon. That's all I'm saying. Whether we can fix it or not, I'm 100% on board with that. I've got a 4-year biology degree at the U of A. I studied the carbon cycle. I totally understand that. And we're not even in a high carbon time. Like historically, we're actually on the low side right now. So, when the dinosaurs were here and the earth was warmer, it was actually a good thing. So even if it gets warmer, I could use a couple degrees warmer here in Alberta every day. Seriously, sir, though, we would be the area in the world that would benefit the most from global warming, right here in northern Alberta. It would increase our growing season. It would do a lot of good things for northern Alberta. And that would be being selfish, so I just don't want to say that that's our deal. Dennis wants the mic here.
I do, because this is obviously a relevant conversation. Yeah. And the kids have been, educated to think, indoctrinated, if you will, to believe that the world is ending because of the climate. So Mitch said that we're at the low end, 420 parts per million. You probably know that if you're following climate. That's the level of CO2. The NASA pictures show that the Earth is greening, all right, slowly. We haven't lost greenery. We've increased it because there's been that bump up in CO2. But we can all agree that the climate is changing. What we can agree to, however, is that the climate will always increase. It will never go down again. But historically, that has been what happened. Now, think about this. Did you see that off the coast of Norway, this was reported, they found a city that's 8,500 years old underwater, okay? Other cities have been found underwater that are thousands of years old. Well, how much carbon was man producing at that time through hydrocarbons? Not much, right? The Industrial Revolution hadn't started yet, right? So we just have to accept the fact that the climate is changing. There may be some other low-lying areas that are going to be underwater, and then maybe at some point in the future they will surface again. Who knows? But the industry itself has taken significant steps. You've probably heard of CO2 enhanced oil recovery. That's something that the energy industry itself has developed. So they're capturing CO2 from the production of oil and gas, but they're reusing it to produce more oil by injecting it into the ground. This is not the same as what I think is a colossal waste of money, which is CO2 carbon capture and storage. And so we've got these giant sucking machines that'll suck CO2 out of the atmosphere. liquefy it and put it into the ground, but it's a useless technology because I don't think it's going to change the climate at all. But you know what it's going to do to all of you here in Alberta? It's going to cost you $30 to $50 billion of taxation. Okay, that's what it's going to cost you. So it's a really good question that you've raised, but I think we can't really go much further down that rabbit hole.
I just want to say something. Wouldn't it be nice if we could trust the media to tell us the truth? I mean, I'm just going to ask you a question. On climate change, like if we knew what was really going on, if the scientists would tell the truth, if nobody had any business interests in all this, well, no, I know that. But wouldn't it be nice if you had to go to jail if you lied? Like, wouldn't it be nice if scientists couldn't tell you that this particular vaccine is good for you, and then you find out that it's not very good for you, and then, or this particular food is good for you, and the other side says it's not good for you? Wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? And I'm going to share something with you. Wouldn't that be the first thing we'd want to do here? Is make it absolute. And then once you have the truth, you can deal with it. But the problem is that nobody knows what the hell the truth is anymore, and they do it on purpose. So I'm 100% with you. If climate change was proven to be the truth, why wouldn't we spend money to try and make it better and improve it? I would be 100% on your side. Nobody wants to live in a situation where we're killing each other, right? So that's my last comment on that. If we could get them to tell us the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, or you go to jail, wouldn't that be nice?
Did that answer your question? Well, we've got two more questions, sir. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my questions. For an independent Alberta, when we look at the Canadian investments that we put in, like RRSPs, tax-free savings accounts, any of the old age security that we're putting in, how's that going to impact us as we move to this, independent Alberta?
Well, imagine how it would impact you if you moved to France or Costa Rica or anywhere. Does it impact you?
Well, would I get taxed?
Well, hang on a sec. If you're in Alberta, you wouldn't be. If you were an Alberta citizen in a sovereign country. So you have a choice. Okay, right now you're a Canadian citizen. Alberta becomes a sovereign country, you can become an Alberta citizen. The difference is if you can declare your citizenship as Canadian for tax purposes or as an Alberta citizen for tax purposes, which one are you going to choose?
Alberta.
There you go. That's
what I want to know is the process, right?
Yeah.
Is if we move as, in an independent Alberta.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden there's a process because the East wants to steal all of the Albertans' money. Are they going to do something in that regard to try and steal our wealth?
Well, that would be rather illegal, wouldn't it? Don't you think?
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would think that would be illegal. There are a lot of hypotheticals, but there are pragmatic questions like your question that need to be addressed. But questions along those lines need to be addressed at the time that or many of them, at the time that we become a sovereign country. Because you're negotiating now with Ottawa about what happens to the debt, what happens to borders, what happens to NAV Canada, what happens to Crown Lands, etc. So this would be part of the negotiation. You'd have a choice. You could say, well, I want to move my investments, which I have at TD Wealth or CIBC Wealth or something, to Chase, okay, or something like that. So it would be just moved. And they couldn't really take it from you legally because, you would be taxed fundamentally based on the citizenship that you prefer. I
think the key thing that
Yeah.
this group needs to worry about is making sure that they tell the people of Alberta what's going to happen in these, in these instances. How do they follow that process to minimize any sort
The
of.
financial risk.
Yeah,
I
the
get
financial
it.
risk, anything like that.
Yeah.
I think that's what you need to do in order to get people on the fence line to come over to this side.
Well, one of the things that I should share with you as well is, and this was a proposal that we made to the U.S. administration as well, speaking of dollars and cents here, is we asked them, or we put it on the table, okay, for discussion. We didn't get an answer, but we put it on the table. Since we would be moving to a U.S. currency, would you be willing to, for Alberta citizens only, to convert $1 Canadian at par to a U.S. dollar? All right, we asked that question. We put it on the table. So you can see how that could benefit us. They have the capacity to do it. It would be a rounding error in terms of their budget, and so, and there's a number of other things that, for certain reasons that we agreed to that we shouldn't discuss, but that's one that we thought would be persuasive for Alberta citizens, knowing that going into a referendum.
Anything on the old age security, like we would just lose that, or?
No, you wouldn't lose your pension. You wouldn't lose old age security. Veteran benefits are another issue, okay? But we would be able to compensate for any loss of veteran benefits by significantly improving them, because as Mitch pointed out, in our analysis of our fiscal capacity surplus, when we become a sovereign country, it's around $47 billion. You can see how everybody benefits. And we would be able to ensure pension, old age security, and veteran benefits, but make them significantly greater as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
This will be our last question because it's getting late.
Thank you for the presentation tonight. It was great. Very informative. Loved it. I have simply one question. If the referendum does not go our way, are we allowed another referendum question? What is the plan after that?
Well, that's a good question, but we got to go back a moment to answer that question. It's really an issue of what question goes forward. If Lukasik's question goes forward in its current form, the answer could be from the public, yes, Alberta, the voters have voted for Alberta to remain in Canada, or it could be no. Voters have indicated that to the government that we don't want to remain in Canada. But because his question is not compliant with the Clarity Act, nothing happens, no matter whether the answer is yes or no. So this is the problem that we're facing right now, is we need a proper question that can go forward. As I said, and as Mitch said earlier as well, the Premier herself can pose a proper question to leave. Now, if, for example, our question went forward and the answer was no, well, do we just give up? Of course we can't just give up. We have to carry on and keep moving. But I think, given what's happening with the mass of immigration, et cetera, this may be our one best time this coming year to have this referendum, which is why I think it's virtually an existential threat to us if we're not able to go ahead with this referendum. So I think it's really important for all of us to show up when required.
So after the Nothing Burger is done, are we allowed our referendum question? Or do we know that yet?
We know that. There are two different questions. It says right in the Clarity Act that a constitutional question and a policy question can be asked simultaneously. But I'm going to share something with you. It's never dawned on me that we're going to lose. We know how many votes we need. We know there's a fixed number of how many votes we need. How hard do you think we're going to work to make sure that we get confirmed people to vote? We know how many votes we're going to need. We've already got, well, I know we have 1 million supporters. Everybody has to bring one more person and we're in. That's it. It's never dawned on me that we're going to lose. If we get the question in, I really think we're going to win this. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. This was a great evening. Thank you for coming.